Welcome to the Mind Sensei podcast. I'm your host, Peter Taz, and I'll be taking you on a journey to the world of martial arts and introduce listeners to some of the most inspiring and knowledgeable practitioners from around the world. Whether you're a seasoned martial artist or a curious beginner, or just enjoy hearing a great story, the Mind Sensei podcast Down Under has something for everyone. So tune in, sit back, and let us take you on a journey through the world in martial arts.
In the beginning, Peter, and I was talking to one of my students today, Kenpo in the beginning is a self-defense. It's learning how to defend yourself. You step back, we're being passive. We step back with that outward block and we're blocking to protect, right? Block to protect, sort of destruction, block, kick, chop. But there's got to be a point in your training where it's no longer passive, it's aggressive. Everything is aggressive. Although I'm stepping back, I'm not stepping back to protect. I'm stepping back to stabilize and attack. So now that block doesn't become a block. It's a strike. Whap. And I want to whap, strike through the arm and rebound it right into the face, right? So my intent isn't no longer about this arm and protecting. It's destroying the arm, but my intent is to hit that face right away. So I'm going to destroy the arm and in the process, destroy and attack. And that's where that path of action comes into play. Think of one move. People say, well, are you emphasizing on the block or are you emphasizing on the chop? No, my emphasis is the chop. That block is just happening as what we call a drive-by. I'm going out into that motion, but I'm not going to stop. I'm going to hit and then trajectory, hit, and then cause it to curve. His arm is actually going to cause my hand to go right back into the face. And it's going to, again, when we hit, remember we talked about that pulley system? It's going to feed him right into that strike. And
We'll let a 2-for-1.
Yep. Now we got a 2-for-1, which we're also using what's called borrowed force. So
Force guided collision. Tell us about your black belt grading. Now, I know you did your first with Mr. Jerry Bradford, but tell us about your Kenpo black belt grading. Because we got no pressure.
So that was probably the worst nightmare of my whole training, right? Was the black belt. And I worked hard to work the material, work the timing. So Mr. Mills's Kenpo, Mr. Mills was IKKA. Mr. Mills was with IKKA. He was IKKA. We were doing IKKA material at the time, right? This is all prior to Mr. Mills breaking off, going IKKA, creating his system. But we're still working these timing patterns and these drills within the techniques. And I'm working it. Like you said, when you did your black belt, you worked at your material hard, hours, 4 times a week, for hours, and you're going to be good. You put that much effort and that much time into it, you're going to be good. And that's how I was working the material in the studio. I'm teaching, I'm working, and as I'm teaching, whatever I learned from Mr. Mills, the way I learned it is I would teach it to my students that were with me at the time. And as I'm teaching it, I'm working it. So we're working this together and we're developing and we're growing together, right? Except I have a little bit of a edge because I saw what Mr. Mills was doing. I can see the effect Mr. Mills wanted, and that was my edge. The students only could learn whatever I was able to demonstrate on them or show them, but I knew, and which wasn't anywhere what Mr. Mills was able to do. So I had that edge of, no, I'm not doing it right. I got to get to this level where Mr. Mills is, right? And I'm working these timing patterns and these techniques. And the patterns in the techniques is really what I'm doing. And Mr. Mills, these guys, they're quick. They had some fast techniques. Boom, right? I was working this stuff. I could do this. And I don't know if it was just maybe the cockiness, whatever, but I really worked hard at it. I wanted to show Mr. Mills, and honestly, in my mind, I wanted to impress Mr. Mills and make him proud that, oh, Larry's really working this hard, and I can see the improvement is really improved. Oh man, Mr. Todd, it's the day of the test. Oh my gosh. Probably the worst day of my entire Kenpo training, everything. I fell, I crumbled like a folded chair. I'm in there. We're in Mr. Mills. This is in his house. The house is called the House of Pain. It's in his basement. The basement is no bigger than probably a 2-bedroom size room, master bedroom maybe. maybe a little bit bigger than a master bedroom, and it's filled. We were so close, shoulder to shoulder, and the guy was literally as far in front of me. And if whenever he said move, we stepped forward. We did this drill, hammer, inward elbow, hammer. It's literally deflecting hammer, but up high, or mace of aggression with this elbow sandwich. We're stepping forward, whack, boom, doing this drill. If the guy in front of me didn't step, he got hit. So everyone had to work together. That's how close we were. It was like when people talk about phone booth Kenpo, that was phone booth Kenpo. I couldn't extend my arm 100% or 90. I had to keep it tight because that guy was literally within striking range already, the guy in front of me. The guy outside of me, my hands could not come all the way out here because these guys were getting hit. And that's how packed it was in this room. There must have been like 30 of us in this room, and we're congested. So we go through this test, right? We're doing these motions, moves, techniques, drills. Even our footwork had to be in a seat. Move. We had to push drags forward, push drags, back knuckle punches. Had to be nice and tight because we were confined. And then we did that. And he did that on purpose. He could have easily, all right, half of you come up, do this stuff, half of you sit down, no switch. He could have easily done that. But he did this on purpose because he wanted our motions to be more tight, condensed. But in the same sense, he didn't want us to look like Tyrannosaurus Rex, right? Fighting like this, right? So he did it on purpose because he wanted our motions not to be overextend, keep it tight. But he would also say, don't, make sure you get that full inward block. Don't go at 100, but get that full inward, come back and then elbow, inward chamber, and let that hand roll. Let it roll, run right into the other. And so it was amazing. The test was amazing. The loin got to doing techniques. We did technique lines, and I'm feeling good about it, right? And we're sweating, moving. First technique, I decided, because I worked hard. I get up there, everyone's doing this thing, wow. I get up there and I flopped. There was no rhythm. It was like 2 left feet. And I'm forcing it. And I can feel that I'm muscling it. And I put my head down, I cross out, put my head down, I walk to the end of the line. And I already knew. I felt like, that was horrible. What the heck? I get up there again, and I'm pumping myself up like, all right, I'm going to do better. We do another technique, right? Trigger salute, blah. And I'm trying to make it happen, not allowing it to happen on its own. Again, forcing the motion. And I'm defeating myself. I cross out, I'm like feeling like that was so crappy. I don't even know what the hell happened. I don't know what's going on. I couldn't understand. Third time, same thing, even worse. And finally, after the third or fourth time, I just told myself, I walked to the end of the line. This is a technique line. I walked to the end of the line, and I can see Mr. Mills just kind of shaking his head. What's happening here? Remember, what was my intention? I wanted to impress my instructor. I'm looking at Mr. Mills shaking his head like, oh my God, this is a bad accident happening. I don't know what's going on. So
I've seen that head shake before. At the camp with Mr. Lillian, he shakes his head at me all the time.
that's not the kind of a rule that you want. You want to see that odd, right? Anyway,
That's the F and Tassie look. What's he doing now?
exactly. What is he doing? So I go at the end of the line, and I'm so down and depressed that I just said, forgive my lame F this. Screw it. I don't care anymore. I don't care. I mentally said I failed. I can't seem to put myself together and and at the end I get to the end of the line, I said, F this, I'm done. I didn't want to quit. So I stayed in the line and I just gave up. I said, I don't care. I'm not getting my belt today. I failed this test. It's done. It's over. Peter, that very next time I get up there, I was just like, I cross out. I'm like, oh my God, what the hell just happened? And then I walk at the end of the line. You felt the energy in the room just change. I felt it change in me. And everyone was like, holy cow. And I walk at the end of the line, and it was a whole different environment, different feeling. I get up there the next time, and everything just fell in. And everyone was just like, what the frick? And I was even like, what the frick is happening? Why couldn't I do this earlier? Anyway, we get through the test, and I'm doing all this stuff. I get up, I do my forms, my katas, and I'm moving it. And I had already told myself, forget it, I'm done. I quit. I don't care if honestly, I thought I'm not passing. It is what it is. So I already accepted that. And I think because mentally I accepted it, I didn't care anymore. It was more about having fun with it at that time. And that's when everything just kind of went into place. I didn't force it anymore.
I think it's a mindset thing, really, because I think it was really all my belts, but I think my third was my pinnacle belt, and I was in my prime, and I was cycling 75 miles on a Sunday, gym 4 days a week, teaching. I was in beast mode. There's no way I'm spending 10 grand and flying halfway around the world, not coming back with that belt. Anyone steps in front of me to stop me from getting it is going to know about it, kind of thing. So it's a mindset. And I think I got a special mention at the end of the grading from a visiting instructor. And he said, well done, great energy. But man, this guy, like, on fire. And I'm like, oh, that was only because I didn't care about any of that. I just I'm going to get it. There's no one's going to stop me. And it was a mindset thing. But what I found was that the energy changed to the whole grading. Once someone steps in and picks up the pace, and everyone goes, all right, we're on, let's go. And it's infectious. It rubs off on people, and it's a good thing.
So anyway, at the end of the test, right? This test is probably 3 hours long. It's about 3 hours long. At the end of the test, we're all standing there because we didn't have room. We're all standing there, right? And Mr. Mills is up in front talking, explaining. Not everyone was testing. At the time, there was maybe only 10 of us testing out of the 30 people that were there. Everyone was testing. And in this test, he's talking about one of you are failing horribly. That's what he's talking. I put my head down. I already knew he was talking about me, right? One of you, sadly, it was a bad airplane accident. You just couldn't take your eyes off of, right? You just had to. And he goes, I don't know what happened, but midway through this test, something switched and everything everything changed. And it wasn't just him that changed. It changed everything in the room. The whole dynamics of the room changed. And I think because I was failing, right? You can control whether it's negative energy or positive. I'm feeling bad about myself. And because I'm feeling bad about myself and I'm walking with my head down, feeling like I was going to break down and cry, I feel like all the other colleagues, because they were were feeling the same way for me, right? So the energy is kind of depleted. And then once I got to the end of the line and I changed that, just said, I don't care anymore. I'm done. I don't even care if I impress Mr. Mills because I obviously didn't impress him one single bit watching him shake his head like that, right? Get out there, then everything in the whole room, like you said, started changing. I think it was me that sucked the energy out. And then it was me that brought it back in because it was my demeanor and how I was emulating my energy out to people because I was feeling down and depressed about myself and my performance. And anyway, so Mr. Mills, we're still going to promote him. And I was just like, what the, in shock, right? Only because, he said the lesson he learned today, which was me, and I really did learn a huge lesson. The lesson he learned about himself today was probably a milestone, will be a forever milestone for him. And two, we know, and I know, what he could do normally without just prior to all of this. Because, we know, as an instructor, we know our students, we know what they're able to do, we know what they could or cannot do and what their abilities are and what their inabilities are. We already know whether they're ready or not ready before we even put them up to test. And so Mr. Mills, sure enough, that day he promoted me to my first black, and man, I wanted to break down and honestly, I don't know why I don't remember the date. I had to look it up. I had to literally look up the date of when I got my black belt. And as I looked it up, April 1st, 1995. And ironic about it was April 1st. I'm thinking as I see it on the certificate, I'm like, wow, April 5th, because it was April Fool's Day and I felt like a fool performing, right, doing my test. But then I also thought, what joke that he gave me my black belt? I don't know, kind of like, because it's April Fool's Day.
Well, he's probably saying to himself, that's the last time I have a grading on April Fool's Day, right?
Right. But that's the last time I'm ever going to test on April Fool's Day. Anyway, but I had to look it up and I always think to myself, I know a lot of people remember their dates of their tests and I could never remember my date. And I think it's just because it wasn't really so much about when I got my black belt. It was more about trying to learn the system. And at that time, trying to impress Mr. Paul Mills. And that was really, people don't understand. I didn't get to meet Ed Parker. I don't know if did you get to meet Ed Parker?
He'd gone by the time I started. So I started in 92.
Yeah, so I
He'd gone.
didn't get to meet. So Ed Parker, Paul Mills is my Ed Parker. And I say that because Ed Parker's Ed Parker, but to me, the grandmaster to me was Paul Mills. I mean, he was my instructor up to a certain point because of politics, but he was definitely a master. He was a grandmaster. Well, he got his 8th degree black belt under the IKKA. So that's mastership, which is 8th degree. And at the time I got my 2nd black is when he got his 8th degree black belt, was promoted through the association, and everyone in this IKKA, he got an IKKA certificate out in Las Vegas. And so, and I'm sure it meant a lot to him, but, I think the same way, it wasn't really so much about the rank as it was the material and learning and being able to apply the material, you know? So to me, the same thing, the rank's important. Rank shows improvement in how you progress, but I don't know. I don't really wear my rank anymore. I do. I Kenpo people, I will, out of respect.
Yeah, let me tell you a story about rank. Okay. With proliferation, a lot of belts flying around the country and around the world, and there's a proliferation of just candy canes flying everywhere.
Right.
I decided at one stage, like you, I'm not going to wear my rank. I'm over this. I'm just going to wear a plain black belt. And then I had Mr. Wedlake out, and I was running a school. So you run a commercial school, right? Yeah, you
Yes,
as a commission. Okay, so you have students, right? So here's my lesson I'm going to pass to you that I learnt. And he said to me, "Why don't you wear your rank?" And I said, "Well, with over it, I just want to wear a plain black belt." And he said, when you travel and you're not a guest, instructor teaching, you wear whatever you want. But when you're teaching, your students need to see your rank and your progression and that you're advancing, and then that gives them a goal to move forward to. So you're teaching American Kenpo, right?
Yes, sir.
And the rank designations are marked on the belts. Okay, so this is probably a broader lesson that I got that I'm sharing now, right? That to go to you and to others that are listening. He said your students need to see that. They need a goal. They need to see the progression. They need to see that their instructors moving forward. So if you're running a school, you should be wearing your rank at the school so your students know. If you're traveling overseas, do whatever you want. But if you're a guest instructor teaching at a seminar, you're representing the art, you should be representing the rank too. That's how to me in those sort of terms. And I went, I understand. And then I started wearing my rank again. I have got some plain blacks as well, but I'm sort of at a stage now where I don't really care. Either or. Yeah. Because I'm not really worried about anyone saying challenging your rank. Not a problem. I have no problem with any of that. But yeah, I was like, no, I'm just going to wear plain black belt. I'm getting, but yeah, and that was from Mr. Wedlake's advice. And yeah, the wise one, right? He was telling me, make it so, and so we made it. But that's my advice to you for your students. They need to see you wearing it, and that's their progression as well, because you never know where inspiration comes from, right? Like I had a phone call, I had a message. I released an episode from one of my instructors, and I had a message that was life-changing for someone. I mean, absolutely life-changing for this individual, because I released that episode and we spoke about them once. Like they were gonna do something crazy, and they didn't. Like, so you never know when we teach our influence, like it sounds a bit full of yourself, but the influence that we have on people is far reaching. Sometimes I think you got to do certain things so the world moves forward ahead. Like you just don't know how far your tentacles reach these days. But that's my advice. That's my advice. So I understand what you're saying, but yeah. So.
No, I honestly, I feel the same way you do and did. There's a lot of rank out there, and a lot of people wearing rank that it's not my place to say, right? It's not my place. But I just felt like I didn't want to, I felt like I was on this train of everyone's wanting to rank everyone. And I was kind of like, I felt like I was still on that train, like, and so that's the reason why I stopped wearing rank. But I agree. And I've had not just you, but I've had other people tell me the same thing. You need to wear your rank. Number one, people need to know. And just as many as bad high-ranking black belts are out there, if no one knows that you're a high-ranking black belt, you're not going to balance the scale out, right? If there's a lot of bad high-ranking belts, and you're just a no-rank belt, or just because that's what they're seeing, there's no way to balance the scale up. So, it's really
It actually unbalances the scale, because they see someone with a lot of red, they see someone wearing a plain black belt, and they see someone moving really well with a plain belt, and they're going, hang on a minute. So it actually tips the scales in the wrong direction too. So that was how it was sort of put to me, which I was grateful for the advice.
Yeah. So I in the studio, I don't wear my rank, but I think, I'm going to reconsider that because of what you're saying for the students' perspective and point of view, and they can actually see, progression and within their own instructor, kind of like a goal, like you said, right? So I think that's a good way to put it, And
Yeah. They need to see the brick. Everyone loves the brick, mate. You got to get the chalky bar, right?
right. So that's the whole thing about rink. And, when I got my belt, that was it. And I traveled all over the place with Mr. Mills, so I got my black belt under Mr. Mills, got my second degree with Mr. Mills. I traveled all over did seminars with Mr. Mills out in Baltimore. We went to, several places all over Utah, did seminars with them. I would go see Mr. Mills. Once I got my green belt, I would make it a point to try to see Mr. Mills because he lived in Wyoming. And, from LA to Wyoming, that's like a 14-hour drive or 16-hour drive. So I would buy an airplane ticket, which is, a 3-hour flight or 2.5, 3-hour flight. And then we would fly into Utah, and then I would drive from Utah up to Wyoming. And I would make it a point to see him. I would try to see him once a month, but it was probably every other month. But I would try as much as I can to see him once a month. Whatever I learned from him for that weekend, I would fly up on Friday, stay there. He owned a hotel. So luckily, he would put me in his hotel for free. And literally, I would walk across the parking lot, and he lived there, right across the parking lot. So he put me in the hotel for free. I would walk across, and but honestly, when we would go train, I would be in the hotel maybe just to sleep, just 4 or 5 hours sleep. And I'd get up, and, Mr. Mills he was a night owl. That guy we wouldn't go to sleep till 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning. Then he would sleep, and then he'd call me, right? I'd go to the hotel. He'd call me at like 9 in the morning or 10 in the morning. Hey, come on over. Let's have some breakfast. Let's get going here, and we would go do things. Mr. Mills to me was like, he wasn't just, like I said, he was like my Ed Parker. He was my grandmaster. He was the one that I saw. He was the one that I wanted to mimic and emulate, right? What he did, how he did things. I'm sure had I seen Mr. Parker, I met Mr. Parker, I would have felt the same way. But a lot of people don't understand. First generation, Mr. Parker was like their shock and awe, like, oh my God, Mr. Parker, because they got to meet him and they got to be with him, like, like Lee Wedlake and John Sapovin and those guys. They were directly under Mr. Parker. I didn't get to see Mr. Parker. I got to know who Mr. Parker was and what he was and his demeanor. I feel like, honestly, I have a lot of traits like Mr. Parker. When I say that, I'm Polynesian, he's Polynesian. I'm a super easygoing guy. I'm really level-headed. I'm not as smart. I don't think I'm as smart. Mr. Parker was a genius. And Mr. Parker had abilities to move and do things, understanding physics and applied physics in the motion. I think I can get there, but I'm still trying to get there and work at it. But it's all work. It's all work. It's all applying the motion and the physics and the concepts and the principles within the motion. But, Mr. Mills was the one who actually, it was all that. It was the whole package of the martial arts to me. It was a lifestyle. It wasn't just Kenpo. It was a whole, when you embrace it, it becomes a lifestyle. It's like in Asia, a martial arts is a lifestyle. It's not just a fighting combat. It's a whole lifestyle. And that's what Mr. Mills was. He took me hunting for the first time. I've never, ever gone hunting. He took me hunting. Him and his boys actually took me snowboarding. First time I ever did snowboarding. But it was like on the back of a quad runner across the street at the school, and I'm holding onto a rope, snowboarding, right? I didn't go down slopes, but I'm kind of like snowboarding behind this quad runner. And I got to do a lot of things with him. It was more than just Kenpo. It was more than martial arts. It was more. He was like a father figure to me. He was like a second father figure, And I always loved Mr. Mills.
But what is some of the hardest things you've had to do in your martial arts journey?
Physically, the hardest thing I had to do on my journey was readjust my whole Kenpo dynamics. So Mr. Mills, we know Mr. Mills is fast and dynamic. Everyone gets caught up in the hands, in the speed. Everyone gets caught up in this machine gun. Everyone gets caught up in the motion of the hands, and they don't really emphasize the boom. They don't emphasize the explosion. Right? There's no major power. Mr. Mills had it. Mr. Mills did it. And that's what we call the thunder and lightning. Lightning is the and then the thunder is the boom, the explosion. So everyone gets so caught up in these hand timing speed drills, so the techniques. My 5 swords were so fast. I mean, when I did 5 swords, Peter, it was and I would. What's funny? My cross outs were just as fast as my technique. And I would cross out, and I'd get in my fighting stance, hands up on the guard. My footwork on my cross out was so quick, I look like Speedy Gonzalez, right? And Mr. Mills, I'm at the end, I'm breathing. Mr. Mills comes up to me, taps me, he goes, you got to ask yourself, by golly, Larry, you got to ask yourself, who's working the technique? Are you working the technique, or is the technique working you? And those little comments like that makes you think. I'm breathing hard, right? I'm going, man, the technique is really working me. By the time you're done, you shouldn't be huffing and puffing. You should be, conserving your energy. Everything should be about economy of motion, energy conservation, all that stuff. So I had to readjust my leaping crane. Oh my God, I could do leaping crane like no other. People would just be like, how the hell are you doing that kick? Because, everything was so settle. Everything was about speed and the timing. Mr. Mills did a seminar one time in Utah. He told me, I came down with him. I went up to Evanston, drove down with him. And he told me on the way down, he's like, I'm going to teach this seminar. It's going to be about, he said it's called timing for emphasis, rhythmic timing. And he's like, Larry, a lot of people can move the hands, but they just can't get the body to move with the hands. They can't get that boom. He's like, they're a big guy. You can probably hurt somebody, but you come across a bigger guy, you're just going to piss him off. You're just going to piss that guy off. You may get lucky. You may hit him in the carotid neck, one of these nerves. You may catch him. Those will be good shots, lucky shots, because those are softer targets. But you got to get that boom. You got to get that power, that explosion. It's got to have that, bam, that dynamic, right? And so he did that seminar. I'm working it out. I'm trying to work the timing. And I'm doing it, trying to emphasize on the power settling. And a lot of it, honestly, It was all about stances. It was how to get into the stances and settle. Wow, boom, settle, emphasize, settle, bam, settle, and then from that settle, go right back into your relaxed mode. Hit, bam, fuse, wow. Once you fuse, wow, and then go right back into your relaxed mode and flow, right? And so he's teaching the seminar, and halfway into the seminar, he comes to me and he's like shaking his head. No one's getting it, Larry. He's like, I think just out of kindness, he said, only you and Woody here is getting it, but nobody else is getting it. And I'm thinking to myself, like, are you just being nice? Saying myself and my co-partner at the time, Woody, his name's Woody. He came up with me during the ranks, and he's like, I'm going to change the seminar. And he changed it in the foot maneuvers and footwork. And he did change it, but he took out the fast hands and kind of just emphasized more on the footwork and the power of the dynamic of the footwork and the hands, right? Kind of syncing them together, settling that neutral, whap, and fusing, settling and fusing. And Mr. Mills, he had me rechange the whole structure. So the hardest part about that for me was when I went and I changed it all, Peter, I went through this year, I don't know what sabbatical, this year of depression, because I was on this high of how fast I was moving, the techniques, how quick I was moving, the dynamics of the speed. Yeah, there was power because, with speed comes power, but there was no explosion, right? And I'm ripping. People are telling me how fast, man, you're quick. Your hands are fast. Your feet are fast. And I'm ripping. Your cross outs are fast. And I'm thinking to myself, my cross outs. Yeah, your cross outs are like, you're crossing out. I'm crossing out just as fast as I'm ripping through these techniques. So yeah, I had to restructure everything to get the boom, right? To get the emphasis. And in doing so, it made my speed come down a notch or a couple of notches to be able to sync my lower portion of my body with my hand portion, right? And you and I both know, we see when people use their hands and footwork or even body English, even getting the body English. Mr. Parker, he teaches a forward bow, but when you watch him in videos do it, he doesn't ever rotate into a forward bow. He positions his body, he gets the dynamic of it, and then he gets right back out of it. His footwork is very subtle. Once we learn the forward bow and pointing the toe forward and pointing it back, that's teaching us the big mechanics of how to rotate back. But when you start moving, you're not having to go into a full forward bow. It's quick. They're more subtle. The motions are a lot tighter and more subtle. Flap, boom, and you're right back out of it. Learning how to transfer that weight, learning how to get that body rotation. Anyway, so I had to slow everything down to make sure I'm getting my good neutrals, settles, fuses. And it was depressing. I had a whole year of, I didn't even want to do Kenpo anymore. I didn't even want to step on the mat. I didn't even want to change into my uniform. It was so depressing. Mr. Mills called me all the time. Probably once a week, he would call me and talk to me and ask me how I felt. How are you doing, Larry? How's this? How's that? I would go see him, and we would work on things. And he knew I was just going through this whole depression because I'm having to restructure my mechanical timing for my body and what I was trying to do. It was bad. I literally wanted to give up Kenpo. That's kind of how I felt. It was Mr. Mills that called me all the time, was talking me through it on the phone. And he would tell me, the biggest thing he would say was the two things. Larry, you got to believe. That sticks with me every single time I do something. His number one thing was, you got to believe. You got to believe that what you're doing and how you're doing it is going to transfer that energy into the opponent's body. You got to believe. And that you got to believe is a big thing for me, right? Because I think mentally, like you said, it's a mind thing. I think mentally we have to prepare ourselves, and mentally we have to prepare ourselves, and we have to also believe in ourselves, in what we can do. And that was one of the things. And the other thing he would always tell me during that time frame was, think of yourself as a turkey, right? Food, Polynesians, I don't know. Think of yourself as a turkey. You're ready. You have all the ingredients. You're set, but you just have to sit and baste her and you have to sit there and absorb all this information that you have. And you have to learn to work that information. It's time. Time has to kind of like sit and absorb. Don't give up. Don't stop doing what you're doing. Because once you start feeling, like he told me, when you feel it, when you understand and you know what you're looking for, you know that fusion, you know the settling, you know, and then kind of getting right back out of it, fuse for a second, and then right back out into fluidity, fuse, fluidity, fuse, fluidity, fuse, and kind of go in and out of that. He's like, once you feel it and you understand it, you will far surpass that level that you felt you were at, right? So that level that I felt I was at before I started coming back down, he's like, you will never get beyond that level had you not go through this transformation process, right? And so once I felt it, and once I started, I like for a whole year, I didn't even want to do I didn't even want to dress. But I did it. I just did it to push through, to work it. Mr. Mills talking me through it. And once I did it, Peter, it was a whole new outlook at how Kenpo was designed. So it wasn't about, and now I call it the rip. I call it the ripping technique, where you can rip through the technique and people rip through it. I think Dennis Knatzer brought that up to me. He's like, Larry, you have a pretty good rip. You rip through these techniques pretty good. Dennis Knatzer. He's like, but man, and you sure know how to put some boom in it. The emphasis, the power. And that boom was really the key for me. That's what I was missing. And that's what Mr. Mills was trying to get me to get in that boom, because I was so used to this rip. To get that boom in there was hard. It was hard. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done in Kenpo. And it was because it was a depression stage, because I felt like I was backsliding and not progressing. So once I got it, my Kenpo is so different. Everything is different. And I can see what Mr. Mills is talking about. I can see what everyone else is talking about. And I use the analogy of the bullwhip. I think I talked to you before about it, but every time that bullwhip snaps, every time it cracks, that's the explosion. That's the boom. But once it cracks, it doesn't fall on the floor. It cracks and it's right back to fluidity. Bam, cracks, right back to fluidity. Now imagine a good person who knows how to work a bullwhip. Paul Mills was the one who introduced me to the bullwhip. And Hug Planis is an amazing artist in doing the bullwhip. Well, Paul Mills took the bullwhip. I bought my first bullwhip from Wyoming up there by Paul Mills. Paul Mills was explaining this bullwhip to me and how the power generates. It is in the coil, and then the recoil of it, the snapping. He said, that bullwhip, the way it snaps, for a second that it snaps, they say it's supposed to be stronger than steel. Crack, stronger than steel. That's how I look at my Kenpo. When I fuse, that boom is going to be the power, stronger than steel. Wham! And then right back into the fluidity like a bullwhip. Bam! So if you work the bullwhip, it's bat, 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 bat. You hear guys that can crack that thing 4 or 5 times. Even guys with the left hand and right hand. I think Hug Planis demonstrated this at one of the Philadelphia camps that I went to. Wow, he's doing 2-hand bullwhips with it constantly flowing and constantly cracking. And so analogy of the bullwhip to me is a key analogy of how I envision my Kenpo. The cracking is the emphasis on the power, and then the motion is the fluidity of the strikes. Bam! So my power is going to be, right up, bam, whap, bap, bap, boom, and then right back into fluidity. Power, fluidity, power, fluidity.
I think Mr. Mills was a professional quick shot.
He was, yes.
So I'm surprised it didn't hit you with the Wyatt Earp line, that says, fast is fine, but accuracy is everything.
He did, actually. He actually used that all the time. And, what was amazing was he was the number one quick draw for like 10 seconds, I think is what people were saying, Mr. Mill. But he told me, true story, he told me, Mr. Parker, because I would go over there and, learn lessons and stuff. We'd hang out in the back patio. Lessons weren't always in his the greater lessons were during dinner while we're eating or hanging out in the back patio, just talking, Kenpo or barbecuing in the back patio. And then he would be explaining things. And so to me, those were some of the greater lessons than actually being in the basement, working the bag, working the mirror, working stuff. But Mr. Mills was like, oh, Larry, he goes, Mr. Parker made me 2/1000ths of a second faster. Or maybe it was 3/1000ths of a second faster. And I was just like, okay, yeah, so. And then he looks at me because he saw my facial expression. I didn't say that, but he just saw my facial, like, that doesn't mean anything to me. And he goes, that's the difference between first and second place. And I was like, oh, that makes more sense. And I said, really? I said, so he made you faster? Like, how did he do that? He goes, Mr. Parker is a genius in motion. He was a genius in motion. He's like, Paul, let me see you draw your gun. Let me see you. Because Mr. Parker was fascinated with just anything fast. Mr. Parker was a gun fanatic. I don't know if you know that. He collected guns. He had, I don't know if I should say, he had Uzis under his bed that I wanted to keep from Mrs. Parker. Mrs. Parker sold to John Sepulveda. And I was like, why did you sell it, Mom? He's like, 2 Uzis, matching pairs, right? Anyway, Mr. Parker was a gun fanatic. He had guns galore. In his office, he had a picture hanging on the wall. And you put your finger on the backside of that picture and open it up, it had a bunch of guns inside there with a bunch of ammunition. It was a picture that was a hidden gun safe in his office, right? So Mr. Parker loved guns. So he asked Paul, he said, Paul, let me see you do your shooting, because he knew Paul was a quick draw shooter. And Mr. Parker is watching Mr. Mills do this quick draw, and Mr. Parker's like, well, if you were, because Mr. Mills is just pulling his hand back and turning his body kind of sideways as he pulls his hand back. His body and his hand are moving in the same direction. Mr. Parker says, well, if you push your hip forward and bring your hand back, you're closing that distance a lot quicker. So instead of moving your whole body back, push your hip forward. I don't know if you push your hip forward and bring it back. Let me stand up here real quick, like this motion, right? You're pushing the gun into your hand quicker, and it'll make you faster. Mr. Mills was like, oh. He said the first time he did that, it made him so fast that he was like 1 inch to 2 inches from shooting his own foot. That's how fast he shot that bullet. And he said it changed, that dynamic changed not just his hip, but he had to readjust his trigger, right? It was a single action gun. He explained to me that when he pulled the gun, his finger was already in pulling the trigger. So I don't know if you're familiar with a single action or double action.
We're not, but continue.
So single action is you literally have to cock the gun and then you pull the trigger. You have to cock the hammer, pull the trigger, right? That's a single action. So you have to physically cock the handle. Double action, you can pull the trigger and it will cock and shoot on its own. Pull, cock, so as fast as you shoot it. That's why the old cowboy days, they would pull the trigger, right? So Mr. Mills shot a single action, and that's a single. So he said what he would do is, as soon as he pulls the gun, he holds the trigger, and then his thumb would hit the hammer. That would be the first shot, and then his pinky the second shot. Pa-pa, pa-pa. What is this? This motion. Thumb, pinky, thumb. That's how he was able to shoot twice, quickly. Pa-pa, pa-pa, right? And that was the section. So when he did that first shot, pa-pa, he almost shot his foot. He said 1 inch, 2, like literally side by side. He had to readjust, not just his hip action, but he had to readjust his firing trigger. Everything had to readjust. The whole body mechanics had to readjust to just how Mr. Parker made him faster. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And you think about that on a motor in a car working at idle speed, sitting in the parking lot, is running smoothly, right? But you get that same car going on the freeway, going 2,500 RPMs or revolutions per minute, moving this fast. everything has to accelerate. The whole timing for the whole mechanism has to accelerate to be able to go that fast. And so it's not just one mechanism that's going to create, there's many things that has to occur for the speed to happen. So we call it accelerated timing. So the accelerated timing is, there's timing and then you have accelerated timing of being able to move that quickly. And you move that quickly, it's not just your hands that's moving that quickly. There's a lot of moving parts that has to readjust for you to move quickly. And in order for that to happen, if you don't ever practice it, you're never going to know what it's like, or you're never going to be able to call it off at any given time, right? So in an example that Mr. Mills would say is, he bought a Corvette and he loves this Corvette. And he's like, do you want to drive it? I'm like, no, I don't want to drive it. He's like, do you want to go on a ride? So he takes me for a ride in it. And the lesson in that Corvette was power, respect the power in the Corvette. Because he steps on it and we're like, and we're booking it, right? He's like, Larry, the amount of power this thing has is incredible. He's like, the amount of horsepower in this Corvette, it's because it's in the chassis and everything's so light, the amount of power that the torque behind it is amazing. So respect the power. He's like, always respect power. Power is amazing, right? Know when to use it, know when to not use it, know when to control and then understand it. Well, power, same thing in Kenpo. If you don't know how to drive 100 miles an hour and you try to drive a car 100 miles an hour and you don't ever work your way up to it, or even 200 miles an hour and how it handles, you'll never be able to pull a car at 200 miles an hour. And if you do, you may crash because things change. Everything changes. Slippery of the road, whatever the case may be. Same thing. If your Kenpo is always the same and you don't ever accelerate it and get that power and that energy, when it comes to calling upon it, you're not going to understand or know how to move any faster than that, because that's what you've gone to, right? That's only as far as you've been able to go. One of the things Mr. Mills told me was, Larry, you got to let the demon out. Weird, right? Let the demon out. What are you talking about? Larry, every now and then you got to let the demon out. And I'm like, what? And he's like, it's a mental, every now and then you got to let that demon out. You don't know what it's like to hit somebody unless you actually hit somebody. Let it out and then pull it back in. Let it out. Wow. And then pull it back in. And now that I think about it more, I'm thinking, here in America, we used to have this term called postal. I don't know if you guys
have it. We have it here too. Yeah. Government worker on the roof, right?
Yep. So postal, where they just click and they just go crazy.
Michael Douglas, he'll lean down, right?
Yep. So that postal mentality is the demon that Mr. Mills is talking about. He's like, you got to let it out. And then learn to pull it in, control it. Because if you don't ever let it out, you're not ever going to know how to control it and pull it back in. Let it out, pull it back in. That's the mental state. That's how you train mentally. When you go to hurt, you want to hurt that person, but to not destroy, but to hurt enough so they can feel it, and then pull it back in. And it's all state of engagement is what Mr. Mills will talk about. So Mr. Parker even talks about it, state of engagement.
So do you have any other memorable moments you can share with us?
Memorable moments in the martial arts? I've been around, being part of Mr. Parker's family, and we got to travel a lot. We got to meet other martial artists, and I think that, to me, that's one of the biggest benefits maybe that I may have had, other than benefiting from reading Mr. Parker's books and all his personal stuff. I even drove Mr. Parker's car, by the way. Mr. Parker used to have a little Volkswagen Jetta. I used to drive that thing all over the place. Had Kenpo 1. There's his license plate, Kenpo 1 on it. But I got to meet a lot of other martial artists, a lot of other great from other styles, grandmasters from other styles. Ming Lam. Ming Lam was a Kung Fu grandmaster based out of San Francisco. But funny story was, when Mr. Parker moved here to California, he was opening up his studio. This is just what I heard, stories from the Asian side of the martial arts, right? There you go. Well, No, he had a Volkswagen Jetta, and it said Kenpo 1 on it. It said Kenpo and the number 1.
You know what comes before one? No number.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I think he was trying to get that Kenpo, but someone else had it, so he had to get the Kenpo 1. And so, but he had a Volkswagen Jetta, a black one, and that thing had a lot of power just for a little Volkswagen Jetta. Anyway, so Ming Lum, Mr. Parker had to get permission to be able to teach martial arts here in California. And he had to actually get it, like Bruce Lee, that story of Bruce Lee having to get permission. Don't teach the Kwailo, that kind of stuff. Well, Mr. Parker knew Ark Wong. Ark Wong was a very well-known, kung fu martial art grandmaster, and he knew Ark Wong, and he worked with Ark Wong. Mr. Parker, and they had a lot of connections to Northern California, which is where Chinatown was. And so he actually, from what I heard, he had to go and get permission from Chinatown. Yeah, I don't want to say the tongues or whatever, the gang, whatever it may be. We had to get permission from them up in that area to be able to teach Kenpo down here in Pasadena. And because at the time there was a guy named Ming Lum. Ming Lum was he actually worked for the Tongs, well, lack of whatever better word, I didn't even know how to explain it. The Tongs, he worked for them, and the Chinese Association or whatever they would call themselves back then. He knew Mr. Parker, and Ming Lum's dad and Mr. Parker's dad worked in the docks together, so that's how they knew it. They were childhood friends. And so when Mr. Parker had to get permission, Ming Lum actually spoke up for Mr. Parker and said he knew them, and that's how he got his permission to be able to open up a studio down here. But what was interesting was I got to meet Ming Lum, and he took us around Chinatown up in Northern California and introduced us to a lot of other martial artists. Mr. Parker was promoted in his ranking. It wasn't just Kenpo people that promoted him. It was the martial arts community. That's what I liked about the back then in the day. It was the kung fu, the karate, the kaju kenpo. It was the whole community of martial arts that would promote people and recognize their grandmaster or their ranking and their system, and Ed Parker's American Kenpo system, right? So I got to meet Ming Lum, and he took us around. Ming Lum was actually, he was a key figure in the martial arts here in the United States. I mean, it was a lot of the martial arts went through Hawaii. And a lot of it went into Hawaii to get here to California and America. And so, ironically, it's weird how we think Hawaii, being such a small little, was like a huge part of the overall martial arts, not just Kenpo or Kaju Kenpo, but martial arts in general. And so that was interesting to be able to meet a lot of people, a lot of masters, grandmasters, and other styles, other systems. And really it was because of, Mr. Parker and his relation with all of them. And so a lot of people, even Steven Seagal, some of the famous people, I met Steven Seagal on the set. I'm not a big fan of Steven Seagal. I used to love all his movies until I met him on a set. And then I kind of lost a lot of respect for him, but he loved Mr. Parker. One thing about Steven Seagal I'll say is everyone talks bad about him. He was definitely, I feel, legitimate in his training and what he did. But he did treat people kind of, I went up and I introduced hey, Mr. Seagal, how you doing? I'm Larry. And he cut me off until someone on the set, we were on a movie set called The Glimmerman, on the set told him, hey, that's Ed Parker's son-in-law. Then he came over, introduced himself, wanted to hang out with me, wanted to get me, and I'm like, no, I'm okay. I'm good. Thank you, sir. It wasn't until then they found out who I was that he was actually wanting to be nice. And maybe I've dealt with a lot of movie stars, and they used to work in the movie industry, bodyguard a lot of them. And I'm going to say 90% of them are very nice. You have 10% that are just jerks and kind of get filled in their head with it or whatever the case is. Steven Seagal was a jerk to everybody. And I don't know, maybe it's just the way he was. I know people that did stunt work with him in other movies. He'd full on kick him in the nuts instead of being nice about it. He'd do it for real. Purposely punch people harder than he should have, or harder than they would have, or whatever the case may be. Anyway, Steven Seagal was really nice to me. And after I saw him do his stuff on the Glimmer Man, I'm watching him, everyone on the monitors, everyone's like, oh my God, he's so fast, he's so quick. And I'm thinking, oh my God, he's so slow. Real life, right? The way he moves. Man, and he doesn't move as well. Cameras actually made him move and look better because of the cuts and stuff. And so I lost a lot of respect because I used to think, man, Steven Seagal is the man. But after watching it all, it just wasn't the same.
I think if you watch it in real life and then you watch movies, two different stories, right?
Two totally different stories. Even myself, I've done a couple of movies, and it's funny. And one of the movies, the guy was like, "Can you punch him? Punch him with your left hand." And I'm like, "Sure." So I punched the guy. The guy doesn't fall. He acts horribly, right? He's this horrible actor. This is a B-rated movie, by the way. Punch him again. He doesn't fall. No, cut. Do it again. Punch him again. No, cut. He's not falling correctly. He's like, they're not buying how he's supposed to fall. So the director leans over to him. He's like, "Can you punch him for real?" I'm like, "Are you serious?" I look at her. "Are you serious? You really want me to hit him?" He's like, I really want you to hit him. Because we must have done 20 takes on this punch. We need him to fall. And I'm like, so this guy, actor, who's a stunt double, doesn't know that I'm going to hit him for real. So I toss this pizza box at him. He catches it, and I full on left hand, caught him right in the pizza box, hit him in the solar plex, and he literally just like his whole face, and he fell down, and he's like gasping for, can't barely breathe. Cut. Perfect. That's a take. We're going to use that, right? And the guy gets up. He's like, "You hit me for real?" I'm like, "I'm sorry, man. It's, what they asked. They wanted to make sure it was a real reaction to the actual strike because he wasn't selling it."
Learn how to react. Here's my card. Classes Tuesday, Wednesday night.
But I don't teach acting lessons. I'll teach you how to take a hit. Anyway, so I hit him. And he's like, "Was that your right hand?" "No, that was my left hand." He's like, "Are you left-handed?" "No, I'm right-handed." He's like, "Oh my God, dude, you hit so hard." I'm thinking, dude, I hit through a pizza box. And honestly, I'm learning how to hit. But anyway, you're right. TV and reality, or movies and reality, are two totally different things. I've done movies where I had to do these fake, with Frank Trejo actually, I had to do like fake punches and overemphasize the punches because Kenpo is too hard to catch on film. I think the best film I've seen that was anywhere remotely close to it was, Born Identity was probably the closest thing to
capture something.
Kenpo as far as fast, dynamic, and quick to the point.
There was too many cuts on Born Identity anyway that made it look like they cut away that quick.
Exactly. And that was it. I think it was the cut that kind of made it, but that's how, to me, that's the image of Kenpo. That's how Kenpo should, wow, boom, real quick and down, right? Interesting stuff. But I got to meet a lot of people. I got to meet a lot of movie stars, a lot of famous people. And then, like I said, probably the most important was meet a lot of our masters in other styles. Kaju Kenpo. You familiar with Kaju Kenpo?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I don't have any experience in it.
The founders in Kaju Kenpo, I got to meet them in Hawaii one time. We went there visiting, just to visit. And we saw this flyer that they were holding a Kaju Kenpo tournament, and myself and my wife at the time decided we're going to stop by it's a tournament, Kaju Kenpo. Mr. Parker was part of it because he grew up under Chow. Kaju Kenpo was under Chow, Adrian Emperado. And we decided to just stop by. We paid our entry fee, which was a spectator. I think it was $5 at the time. Paid to get inside. As soon as we walked in the door, Peter, oh my God, it was like royalty walked in this room. So they saw us pay. We had people come and escort us to the front desk where all these grandmasters of Kaju Kenpo, we sat at the front table with them. They brought us food, they brought us drinks, and then they brought us our money back. I was like, what? And then they introduced us, they stood us up, they stopped the tournament, stood us up. "We want to introduce to you Ed Parker's daughter and son-in-law," right? And this is all because of Ed Parker, Mr. Parker. And so it was amazing. I didn't even know the amount of, I think I just got my black belt, so I knew the influence Mr. Parker had, but I didn't know the influence he had on other systems and other people. But with that particular Kaji Kenpo, he grew up with them. So it was like a brother system. They both, Mr. Parker and Adrian Imperato. Adrian Imperato is like Mr. Parker's older brother in the martial art. He started way before Mr. Parker. He actually started learning. And I've read that, and I believe Mr. Parker, Adrian Imperato gave Mr. Parker a black belt in Kaji Kenpo. I believe. I swear I saw a certificate somewhere, maybe in one of his books. I know Mr. Parker wrote a book called Memories. Maybe it was in there, I don't know. But I wrote the preface of that book, Memories, Mrs. Parker wrote. So, good stuff. I was privy to a lot of things being married into the family, but I was also privy to a lot of bad things being married into the family. So, there's a lot of good things and a lot of bad things. With the good comes the bad. So you just learn to deal with it.
I hear you. You were talking about driving Mr. Parker's car, and it had the plate on it. I was just going to show you the same thing here. This is one of them.
Motorcycle? Oh, look at that.
So that's my bike. It's KNP0.
Oh, 0. That Kenpo 1 license plate I kept, and I think I still have it in my garage here. Oh, yes. Very nice.
So it's all Kenpo here. They're my plates, but everyone asks because they don't know. I go Google it. I think the best thing was when I had the other car, which is an Australian car, Holden Commodore. It's like your Chevy over there, right? Your Chevy.
Yeah.
And I had the magnets on the doors. So you had a square magnet, you'd stick it on the door, and it'd say personal self-defense, American Kenpo, pressure point fighting, self-defense. And people used to get road rages. They would get all angry, and they'd pull up next to you, and they'd spot the magnets, and they'd go, just keep driving through. So they were the best deterrents because people would just keep driving, spotted the magnets. So
it's amazing. You know what? One time I was, real quick story. I'll just try to make it real brief. I was with a bunch of friends of mine. I was doing Kenpo. I think I was a yellow belt, and I learned the forward bow, right, as a yellow belt, and how to punch in a forward bow. And this is actually what made me realize that the power behind Kenpo. So I learned the forward bow, and I told myself, because I grew up boxing, I would never punch like this. I would never punch, turn my foot, turn my whole body, because it just didn't feel dynamic. It didn't feel like it was effective. So then I'm out with some buddies of mine, and they're martial artists, Taekwondo and Kung Fu. And we're in Santa Monica Pier. It's a beach out here, popular beach, where all the movie stars. And anyway, there's a pier. And there's this game, a big hanging bag, like a speed bag comes down, and people are punching this bag, and it swings back up. It locks up in place. And then there's this big dial on top that spins and tells you how many pounds of pressure that punch was. Well, of course, you're drawn to it. Everyone was drawn to this game and on this pier. The whole arcade, and you must have had 80% of the people were standing around this game watching people, and it costs $1 every time you punch it. It was $1 for 2 punches, right? You put $1 in, you get 2 tries. And there was a line of people just punching it, people running, punching, people jumping, punching, all kinds of punches. And you're seeing there 300 pounds, 400 pounds of pressure. It is spinning. It's 500 pounds of the pressure, 600 pounds. And we must have sat there. Me and my buddy sat there, and we must have watched 9 people hit this thing. And my buddies are like, I think they were trying to set me up for failure. Hey, you should punch this thing. No, I'm not going to punch this thing. I'm just a yellow. I may have just gotten my yellow belt. I was wearing at the time, Ed Parker. It was his jacket. It said Parker on the back. It was a black, silky looking jacket.
You have it.
I think I still have it. I'll grab it. I'll have my wife grab it here real quick. But it had his name on it, Parker, with a crest patch. It was black. This one was black. There's the silky satin looking ones. And so I was wearing that jacket, and my friends were like, hey, you should punch this bag. Let's see how strong you'll punch it. And I'm like, Nah, I'm not going to punch you because I'm like shy. I don't want to embarrass myself and not be able to do it. So I was wearing this jacket, believe it or not. Oh, I don't see if you can see this, right? This is the old, I left it. There you go. Well, this is the old satin jacket, right? And that's the jacket I was wearing. And that's his jacket. This also is his other one that you would see him wear at the Elvis stuff. And it had the, of course, patches. Anyway, so they talked me into doing this, right? Punching this machine. And I'm thinking to myself a lot. And they're like, we'll pay for it. I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I doing? I get up in front of there, no joke. And I'm worried. I'm thinking, man, this is going to be crap right now. My hands are up on the guard. Wham! I just turned my body, pivot in that forward bow, boom, and hit the bag. And that thing just goes, whoa, 700 pounds of pressure, more than anybody else. And I'm like, holy frick. I'm surprised. I'm shocked myself, right? So I wasn't trying to, and it gives you one more time. And I'm like, what the frick, am I going to be able to beat that? Mentally, remember, I think I have more mental issues than I do physical. I defeat myself mentally. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, boom, and I pivot in that forward bow, wham, hit that bag, one thing spinning, 800 pounds of pressure. And everyone, it was like packed with people were just like, oh my God. You know, like you can hear the oohs and ahs. And I had my jacket on and I walk out. And as soon as I walk into the crowd, it was like Moses parting the Red Sea. People just went, and I walked in between and people were like, Parker, Kenpo Karate. You can hear them saying this. And I'm walking in like, what the frick just happened? You know, like what just happened right now? And because I was thinking to myself right before that, I'm thinking I would never punch in a forward bow. And then here I'm hitting this machine, punching in a forward bow, and the pounds of pressure that I was giving off were higher than these guys running and punching and these guys doing, people were kicking this thing. And I'm just going, dude, maybe that forward bow really does have some power behind it. There's some value in there.
You know what that's called? That's called old school social media.
It's exactly what that is. It's like, you know, people didn't talk crap in front of your face. Back then, it wasn't on the keyboard. It was, what'd you say? You know, you got a problem? Let's talk it out now or figure it out.
Right.
Even what's amazing is tearing a phone book. Do you know the secret behind that? You look at a phone book and people try to tear it. It's hard to tear, but it's a technique, right? You fold it and peel forward and it tears like butter. And so when people see that, they're just like, so they said, know the system or know the dynamics, the physics behind the motion of what you're doing. And it makes it effortless. And I think that to me is, honestly, that's what I out of my whole Kenpo thing, I think that was the biggest thing I've tried to learn, Mr. Mills, and from everyone else, the effortless fact of making things work. How can I do it effortlessly, you know? And really by applying all the concepts and principles or the principles and the concepts, of course, behind it, definitely makes your motion and your Kenpo effortless. So
I think they're
all good stuff.
Learn the system. I keep saying to my guys, if you have to fight the technique or you have to muscle it, you're not doing it right. Like, it should be effortless. That's the end goal. It should be all effortless. Not to say that I'm anything special or anything like that, but it's like what I've learned. If you've really got to struggle, then you're not doing it right. So either change what you're doing or find someone who doesn't struggle and get them to show you.
That's how I felt my first degree black belt test. Well, it was a struggle because I felt like I was forcing it. And sometimes it's a mental, I think a lot of times it is a mental status, you know.
I keep saying black belt isn't a physical test. It's black belt's a state of mind. And if you're not in that state of mind, you ain't going to get there. Because like you said, your instructors will not put you up if you're not ready. Any instructor that's worth their medal already has tested you before you step on the mat. It's a pressure cooker test and it's a state of mind.
I totally agree. And I think that's why I said that when Mr. Mills would always tell me, you got to believe, right? Mind, body, spirit. So it's a state of mind.
If you listened to everyone who said you couldn't do whatever it was you were doing, you wouldn't do anything, right? I'm your host, Peter Taz, and you've tuned in to the Mind Sensei podcast from Down Under. We want to take a moment to thank all our listeners for tuning in to the Mind Sensei podcast. We appreciate your support and hope our show has been both informative and entertaining for you. If If you haven't already done so, we would like to invite you to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. Finally, we'd like to thank our guests for sharing their knowledge and experience with us. Without their generosity, this podcast would not be possible. Thank you again for listening to the Mind Sensei podcast Down Under. We hope that you continue to join us on this journey through the world of martial arts.